Do you know what time it is? It's supernatural story time. And if you're easily scared, and even if you're not, there's only one thing left to do. Just turn off the lights, because these are stories that you listen to only in the dark. Dark Stories for the Dead of Night, Volume 5, Story Number 1. This was an area west of Homestead, Florida, around January of 2008, a little bit after maybe 6:30 p.m. A couple was driving in far western Dade County in the rural areas where strawberries and tomatoes are grown. They were looking at the last field. It was a plot of about 4 or 5 acres of planted strawberries with a small house and a barn towards the back. And beyond that was the Everglades. They pulled to the side of the road to observe a bright light that was approaching silently from the west-northwest. It was very bright. It finally came to a stop and hovered over the farmhouse. With a sharp hissing noise, a beam of light shone directly on the roof of the house for a few seconds, and then disappeared. At this point, once their eyes had adjusted to the intense glare, they could see black spots along the widest point of the oval. Suddenly, there was a strange distortion developing in the sky over the house as the object became darker and appeared to shrink in on itself. It was a kind of swirling distortion that appeared to increase in size and seemed even to distort the sunlight and cloud as it did, and the object became even darker and smaller. Then there was an audible low-pitched popping sound, almost like one can make by pulling a finger out of one's puckered mouth, and the object disappeared altogether. The distortion effect subsided, and it disappeared after a few seconds. They then approached the house by passing through the gate and going up the driveway, and detected a strong smell of ozone, like from a strong electrical gadget, as well as an organic kind of repugnant odor. They looked up to one of the windows and saw grayish reptilians staring at them. Terrified, they made a U-turn right through a flower bed and left the area. As to who or what it was, they never got any answers. Next story. This was told to me by an ex-boyfriend of mine about 5 years ago. I don't remember his exact words, but I do remember the gist of the tale. He'd lied to me many times, but I wasn't dating him for his intelligence. It seemed he believed this is what happened to him. As far as what actually happened, I don't know. And I'm not going to ask him. This happened around 1995, probably in the springtime, and I believe it was near a suburb southeast of Orlando. He said he lived at the last house in a cul-de-sac in a predominantly Cuban neighborhood. My ex, hereafter referred to as X, said that this takes place in the woods near either an abandoned airport or a mall. I think it was an airport, but I can't remember precisely. He and two of his friends went into the woods there one night when they were in their early teens. I dare say they had beer and were looking for a private place to drink and, shenanigans. So they go deeper into the woods, and X smells something first. Then his friends comment on it. It smelled like garbage. He says absolutely reeked of garbage. A blob of black sludge dropped in front of X's shirt. It stunk. It was vile, and they have been detecting it for several minutes now. In front of him drops a very tall, around 8 feet, a thin creature with red eyes. It was covered in long, fine black hair. The way it landed, he said, it was the most horrifying part. It landed without a sound. It landed on its feet from branches that had to be at least 10 feet in the air. It landed without disturbing the ground, like an illusion. They ran home, but that's not the end. Being an idiot, X decided to borrow his father's pistol and return to the woods to kill this thing before it decides to come out and cause some kind of chaos. He really didn't know if what this was an alien, a demon, but he found both conditions offensive. He returned to the woods alone after dark. It wasn't long before he smelled the creature stink, or before the same thing dropped down in front of him again, 5 yards away. He raised a pistol, aimed to fire, and the creature only stared at him. This is where I start to lose my suspension of disbelief. X suddenly felt that this thing was no threat. He lowered the pistol, and the creature took off into the woods. X gave chase. A quarter of a mile or so later, he chased the creature into a clearing where there were more of them. There is a larger one in the center standing with the one X was chasing. They appear to be in a conversation. This larger one is more of a gray collar and taller. They both looked at X, and the gray one raised his long-fingered, bony hand towards the young boy. The small, black-haired one seemed to say something like, X says the communication was not audible to the gray one. The message was clear. It's all right. He won't hurt us. The gray-haired creature lowered his arm. At this point, outnumbered, X left, fled. He never went back into those woods alone or otherwise. That's the tale. I'm not sure if I believe it myself, but he swore it was true. I've told it to the best of my knowledge and memory, as well as refining his telling into something more readable. And as much as it sounds incredible, there's a part of me that believes him. Next story. I haven't seen what I'm going to describe in a few years. Those strange things still happen in the same home every now and then. As far as I know, no one died in the house or anything like that. I won't give out my address, of course, but I will say that I live in Melbourne, Florida. I've only seen it a couple of times, and could be just as loony as a tune, but I've seen a strange humanoid in my current home. It looks like a pale human with lots of burns, but the most shocking feature to me is that there's nothing from about the waist down, except torn flesh and stuff. The first time I saw it was when I was leaving the bathroom. It was dragging itself down the hallway into my room. I followed it in, but couldn't find it anywhere. Dismissed it as my eyes playing tricks on me or something, though I'd seen it quite clearly. The second time was a while later when I fell asleep in my room with my TV on and woke up to the feeling of being watched. It was holding itself up on the edge of the bed and was just staring at me. Funny thing is, I didn't feel scared. I was mostly just confused and stared back for a bit before I fell back to sleep or something. Could it have been a hallucination of the dream? I don't know. Even though I wasn't scared at the time, it's somewhat disturbing to think that I didn't even try to get away from it or anything like that. Next story. This took place a few years back, around 2009, at a family gathering. My brother casually mentioned to my sister and I that his wife had seen a UFO and that it had scared the crap out of her. When my sister and I approached her, she wouldn't talk about it. So we decided on New Year's Eve to get her nice and buzzed and then try to get the story out of her again. Well, she was more than buzzed when we brought it up, and you could see her face change, becoming upset. We kept at it, trying to coax it out of her until she finally told us the following. My brother and her lived in a very rural part of Naples, Florida, near where my mother's house is. She awoke one morning from a nightmare, coincidentally, about UFOs, and she went out to a porch for a cigarette. Outside, parked on the street in front of her house, was a glowing saucer-shaped ship. Coming out of it, dressed in what she described as combat armor and holding weapons, were a group of 7-foot-tall reptilian humanoids. She said they were very massively built and evil-looking. She started backing away in terror when one of them turned to her. Then in her head, she said it didn't move. Its mouth, she heard, "Go back inside. We're not here for you." Then the figure crossed the street to the house across from hers. She turned and scampered back into the place and hid, not daring to look outside for a good while. Apparently her daughter was also involved in this sighting, but this is as much of the story as my sister and I could get out of her. I know this sounds ridiculous, but if you heard her tell it and saw how she sobered up very quickly while doing so, it might creep you out as much as it did us at the time. At one point, she broke into tears and hysteria, so we asked her to stop and never approached her about the subject again. We've never asked the daughter about it. My brother says he slept through the whole thing. Next story. Location on this is the Panhandle of Florida. I was traveling on Highway 10 from the west coast to the south coast of Florida. I was with my 6 kids and pulling a trailer with all of my belongings and 3 dogs in it. I was in a big SUV and it was around 2 a.m. The kids were all asleep and my 13-year-old daughter was in the passenger seat to make sure I stayed awake. So after traveling Highway 10 for 3 days, I decided since we reached Florida we could cut through the state to save some time. So we got off on Highway 10 on an off-road in hopes of getting gas and making up some time. It was along Route 27, and we came to the first little gas station. It was somewhere near the Apalachicola National Forest. It was closed. I was nervous because we needed gas, so we continued on. Told my daughter to keep an eye out for deer crossing the two-lane deserted highway, because hitting a deer would kill all of us and turn us over due to the trailer we were pulling. We were traveling around 45 miles per hour. I remember this so clearly like it was yesterday, but it was 3 years ago. We had our brights on because the road was dark and winding. Few houses were on the highway, but not many. As we came around a corner and the headlights on the road, there was a lot of blood, fresh blood, and on the side of the road was this 6 or 7 foot tall creature. It was on its hind legs, hunched over a dead deer, eating it. It didn't look up, not even when my headlights hit it. It was using its arm like a human, eating the deer. It had a very muscular body, pointed ears, and a long muzzle. If you ever saw a werewolf, this was it. It had a skinnier lower body, but used its arms and hands just like a human. If it looked up, I would have died. I looked over at my daughter. We were both seeing the same thing at the same time. Tears came to my eyes instantly, and at the same time we both said, werewolf. I sped up because I was scared it would run and jump on the trailer and kill my dogs. As we got about a mile away, my heart was beating so hard. My daughter and I were so freaked out. It was a werewolf. I've never been a believer in werewolves. I don't watch any werewolf movies or have any reason to make this up. As a matter of fact, until today, I've only told a handful of people about this. There is a werewolf in Florida. Not sure the exact town or road, but I wish I did know, so I could find out if we were the only ones to have seen this thing. Oh, live my life wondering. It was between Alabama to Florida along the Panhandle. I will never forget this night, ever. Next story. My brother shared with me his true story of an extremely odd, evil, and clairvoyant man that he and his friends encountered a few years back in Jacksonville, Florida. My brother and his buddies were drinking at a bar when a strange man approached them. My brother described that at first he felt merely perturbed by the presence of this man because he looked like a hanger-on who was trying to butt into the conversation. He said this guy was trying to be jovial, laughing as if he knew what the guys were talking about, and trying to slide into the group. His appearance was more of a nuisance than anything else at this point, and other guys seemed interested in talking to the stranger, but he managed to make his way into their circle. My brother said that out of nowhere the mood of this stranger changed completely, and so did the subject matter, as he asked my brother's friend, "If I could give you anything, what would it be?" At first the friend laughed it off, but the stranger let it be known by his tone that he was completely serious, and he asked him again, "If I could give you anything?" The friend replied something like, "I don't know, man, money and a really hot wife?" Well, things got really weird when the stranger admitted how he could do these things for him in exchange for his soul. He then started openly sharing the detail of his demon possession, specifically by the demon Beelzebub, and how it was his duty to find a human willing to sacrifice his soul, one person every year or something like that. My brother noticed his eyes became blackened at some point, and the most indescribable evil aura was around him. The guys were all getting freaked out, yet still thought this guy was probably full of it. The stranger wanted to prove his ability, so he asked the guy to ask him any question about himself and he would answer it. So my brother's friend asked, "Okay, what is my mom's name?" And the demon answered, "Kelly," with an I, which was absolutely correct. At this point, being all completely freaked out, the guy decided to get the heck out of there. What stands out most to my brother is the incredibly evil, creepy, inexplicable feeling that he had, along with his friends who witnessed this firsthand. Next story. I'm from Fort Lauderdale, but went to high school in Ocala for a year or two. It's Central Florida and it's mostly farmlands, but even in the city it's pretty dead at around 10 p.m. Well, at about 11 or 12, my close friend and my cousin, all around the same age, 17 or 18, were packed in a single cab pickup truck, and no one else was on the road. We were in town and going around a turn when something ran across the road right in front of the truck from one side to the other, about 15 feet in front of our truck. We were going at about 45 miles per hour and this thing zipped across the road easily. It looked like it had a white, old, skinny man body. The hands and feet were extremely long and a disturbing face with teeth exposed. It was running across the road on all fours. As soon as it happened, we all looked at each other like, "Did you just see that?" We discussed it further, and we still talk about it to this day. Next story. In 2007, I briefly separated from my husband. He had serious drug issues, and I got tired of the stress and lying. A friend of mine was moving to Wisconsin. He offered to help me get out of Florida. I had 3 teenage kids who were also ready to start a new life, so I took him up on his offer. I had a small car and signed it over to my husband because I couldn't get it to Green Bay. We left in mid-August and arrived in Green Bay 17 hours later. My friend had rented a home for us and we settled in. It was in a perfect neighborhood. We couldn't be happier. One day in September, my kids went to the park that was at the end of the street. I was home alone just enjoying my new life. I had the front door open and the storm door closed and locked. Then there was a knock on the door. As I turned from the kitchen and took a step toward the door, the strongest feeling of doom overcame me. I was filled with terror. I stopped for a moment in my tracks. Another knock came from the door and I found myself suddenly standing in front of it. Standing on the top step were 2 boys, maybe 12 or 13 years old. The terror inside of me was so strong that I wanted to vomit. I was shaking when I began to speak, but one of the boys spoke first. "Please, miss, can you let us in? We need to use your phone." The fear was palpable, but I answered, "Don't you guys have a phone?" They both turned to each other, not saying a word. Then the boy spoke, changing the question matter. "Please, miss, my brother needs to use your bathroom. We won't hurt you. You don't have to worry. Please give us permission to come in." I said, "No, I don't think so. There's a gas station on the next corner." The boy's head tilted upward and his eyes were just 2 deep, dark pools. They were soulless. The other boy also looked at me. "Miss, we need to come in now. Let us in." I said no. I slammed the door shut and locked the knob, the chain, and the deadbolt. I was shaking like I had been in a very cold room. I looked out the people, and they were both looking at the door. The one boy kept saying, "Please let us in. We are cold." How can it be cold? It was 80 degrees outside. I yelled through the door, "Go away. I'm going to call the police." I looked out, and they stood there and only stepped off the stairs when my boys came walking up the sidewalk. I watched as the boys got to the end of the walkway and turned in the opposite direction which my boys were coming. They ran up to the door and were surprised to find it locked. I carefully unlocked it and hurried them in and then, behind them, locked it again. They asked me who the kids were and I told them that they were just kids selling candy for their schools. After that day, I tried to stay aware of what is around me. All I know is that what I experienced was something out of a movie. It traumatized me and I sleep with the lights on. I didn't tell my kids until my youngest, a girl, had graduated from high school. My oldest son said that the moment he had stepped onto the sidewalk where our house was, he felt a weird feeling in the pit of his stomach. He also admitted that he had seen the both of them down on the walking trail, but never since. Every time I think of this incident, I get sick. This happened in Los Angeles, California, when a man said he saw a judge change shape and become a reptilian. The man, whose name was omitted in the report, said he was attending a court proceeding for a traffic violation when he observed the judge turn into a reptile. He was standing about 10 or 15 feet away from the judge, and he saw when the judge momentarily changed shape into a reptilian, then changed back into a human form. The event, which the man claimed to have taken place about 5 or 10 seconds, was reportedly not noticed by the other 15 people present in the courtroom, including officers and reporters. The Los Angeles resident also maintained that his case was rescheduled. He says the next time that he went to go in front of the judge, she recused herself and would not see him. He added to the report submitted to move on. The judge did not want to speak to me after this, but had the bailiff tell me to return at the next scheduled court date. I never saw the judge again, in my return visits to the court. The judge, he said, was dressed in a black robe, and her face was the only body part he noticed to have changed shape. He said, I did not see her hands at the event as they were on their desk and were blocked by the podium where I stood. No words were spoken during the shape change. The man said he was sure about what he saw and that he had only told 2 people about the incident. I saw what I saw. I will never forget it, he said. Some paranormal researchers believe in the existence of a race of snake-like underground creatures. Proponents of the reptilian theory, such as David Icke, suggest a conspiracy involving these humanoids taking over planet Earth. According to its followers, these creatures are meticulously involved in daily political decisions affecting governments across the world, as they also believe that they are capable of morphing or shapeshifting at will in order to deceive the population. In June of 2015, a Texas man said that he reptilian-looking humanoid had startled him when the alleged creature had entered his house in Brownsville. A month earlier, a motorist in Florida took a photograph of what he called a being with heavy eyelids and weird scaly protrusions driving a vehicle in front of him. In early 2015, a woman said that her Native American grandparents had encountered an unidentified reptile-like creature while crossing the Sabine River from Louisiana into Texas in 1920. In 2002, a girl in Virginia claimed to have seen a similar creature while camping at the Yogi Bear Jellystone Park in Page County. She stated that the animal looked like a mix of a horse and a Komodo dragon, with a dark gray-brown color. What are these things? No one knows. Next story. This happened around 2005 when I was 12 years old. I saw something that I still cannot explain. It was night and I was lying on my bed enjoying the wonders of three-way calling when something outside caught my eye. My bed had a window about 2 feet away from it, and I could see the tree outside my house very clearly from the head of my bed. As I ignored my friend, I looked out of my window and watched in shock as a tall metallic light blue creature leapt from the base of the tree onto one of the middle branches. Now, there's no way in hell that a branch about 3 inches in diameter could hold a creature of that size. It was over 6 feet tall, smooth skin, muscular build, and strangely shaped facial features. As I lay there, in a mixture of shock and awe, the creature just crouched on the branch, watching me curiously. I didn't feel any fear, just a bit shocked at what I was seeing. After about 15 to 20 minutes of watching, this thing sat there, and then it lifted its head and let out a call that sounded like if a duck was quacking underwater, and jumped down from its perch. I watched as it casually crawled back into the tree line and disappeared. I've never seen it again, but it's something that has always stuck with me. And let me see. One of the things, its head was proportionate to its body, but it appeared to have a short snout. Also, that leap would have been about 15 feet in height, and it did it with ease. Now, I lived in that same house until 2015, and I would frequently walk about a quarter of a mile to my friend's house at night. The path was a dirt path, and on the right side, directly next to the trail, was a heavily wooded area. To the left was an open field that was against a canyon full of springs and trees. Some nights, I could feel that creature nearby, and instead of frightening me, it would put me at ease. Maybe, do you think I was being stupid? Next story. This occurred in Ocala National Forest in Florida in 2011. It may have been February, but I'm kind of fuzzy on the exact date. I was at a rainbow gathering with a friend of mine, and I guess I had a bad trip of some sort one night. I was lying in my tent, too scared to sleep from the voices in my head and the groping. I was being harassed by a man I could not see, but I could feel him touch me and even hear him grunting. At some point, the door to our tent opened up and I could hear a loud rattlesnake from outside. It sounded huge. A half-woman, half-giant snake slithered into the tent. I dared not look at it, as I thought she would Medusa me into stone or something. I could, however, make out the shape of it from my peripheral vision. It had a hood like a cobra that went from the middle of its back to about 8 inches above the head. It gazed at me for about 2 minutes before slithering back out of our tent. I stayed awake through the night and into the day, too scared to close my eyes. My friends in the tent were sleeping like logs, and the friend I was with passed away a couple of years ago. I smoked a small amount of marijuana that night, though it wasn't my first time. I was also drinking some coffee from the campsite adjacent to us. I wasn't drugged to my knowledge, but this night led to a series of unexplained phenomena, starting with that one. Next story. The time was December 23rd, 1978 at about 1 a.m. I remember the date clearly as I was 10 years old and Christmas was just 2 days away. I always think of this story because it's been burnt into my mind like it was yesterday. I lived on a mesa in Safford, Arizona. There were 4 other families that lived on the mesa, and our farm was on a 40-acre piece of land, with our nearest neighbor being about a quarter of a mile away. I was awake, for lack of a better term, pulled to my bedroom window, which faced the Graham Mountains, which during the day I could see the road that went to the top of the mountain. There was no home or a building anywhere in that direction, at least not in 1978. What I saw about 200 yards away was a classic silver UFO with the 2 halves that separated the craft, a pulling light that went clockwise in direction, and a ramp coming from an opening at the bottom of the ramp were 3 aliens whom I could see clearly, unclothed, looked like grays with very large eyes and very spindly arms, but they were short, and I saw them at a distance, but then I heard them inside my head. And when I heard them talking to each other in some incomprehensible language, I then realized I wasn't able to move any part of my body. And of course, my heart started to race. I guess one of them noticed and tried to calm me down and told me or informed me that I was being given a gift and not to worry, that I would be thankful for it. It was like my brain was a filing cabinet and they were riffling through it. And I've always had the feeling that they either left something or modified something, as after going to sleep, which I don't remember how that took place the following day, I had amazing things take place. Now, I woke that morning and went to my friend's house, which was about a quarter of a mile away, and told him about the experience. And he said, "Let's go to where you saw the ship." When we got there, where it had been was a brand new green plants on the otherwise lifeless or occasional creosote bush, which was randomly strewn around. This was a solid bright green circle the size of the craft I'd seen. The next night was the night before Christmas, and after falling asleep, I awoke floating out of my body in the lotus position, the kind the yogis do, and looked down at my sleeping body. I was on autopilot, just along for the ride, and this included going through my closed bedroom door. I didn't feel anything as you might expect. I saw everything that was under the tree, but unwrapped, including the Stretch Armstrong, the Rock'em Sock'em robots, etc. Then I went back floating about 3 feet above the ground again, through the closed door, and back into my sleeping body. Since that happened, I know that it's occurred, but still believe the gift that was supposedly given really isn't a gift. On occasion, for no particular reason, words will come out of my mouth about something in the very near future that will occur. On many occasions, I've just said something to my wife. Like once while driving, I said, "2 of those 4 guys on the Gold Wings will be dead only an hour later before going on the bridge to the first Keys in Florida." Later on, we went to witness 2 of the 4 bikers weeping over the 2 dead bodies on the side of the highway. And once out of many such similar occurrences, I was benefited by hearing a warning in my head and then physically pulled backwards before a Zix Zone 1.5-inch rotary valve that I was directly over, particularly my head, exploded and went about 80 feet into the air and onto the next street. That would have killed me, and many other similar things, usually regarding people about to die in a motor vehicle accident. Some gift, huh? I do attribute it, though, to my experience that night. What do you think? Next story. We had a house in southwest Florida back in the early to mid 80s. For over a week, our neighborhood had a series of what I believe were werewolf stalkings. It was June, I think, around 9 p.m. I was out back on the patio. At that time, no one had fences around their property because all of us knew the other families around the area. The only exception was the family across the street from us. They had a 7-foot tall cinder block wall behind their house. They had a large wooded piece of property and kept equipment out there. The dad was in construction and the wall enclosed 3 sides of the property. It was hot out and a slight breeze, no clouds, and starry. As I sat there, you could hear the dogs in the neighborhood that began to bark. Then everything got really quiet. A lone howl started, so I howled back. I do this rather well. What can I say? I watched Nat Geo, and I could mimic wolf cries. Anyway, this went on for about 5 minutes. Each time the howl from the other end got closer. Down the road are train tracks that run north to south. The seconds seemed to come from that direction. I started to get spooked as the howling stopped. Our yard had bushes and a tree on the side where the sound came from. The hair on my arms and neck started to stand up, so I felt like I should go in. As I stood, I heard movement by the bushes. I glanced over and saw something move. I didn't wait to see what it was, so I booked it into the house and I stood by the door, which had glass panes in it. I watched as something very large and dark moved about the bushes. It moved away, and I could no longer see it from my vantage point. I went to the front porch to look out the window, hoping to get a look at whatever was there, but it never came out that way. So I went to bed and got to reading for a while to calm down. About less than an hour later, my brother came home. He came to my room and was white as a paper. He was shaking all over, his eyes the size of saucers. I asked him if he was okay. Now, my brother's the sort that has an explanation for anything unusual, and he's a big guy. So for him to be in this state was not normal. He said, "I need you to come with me right now. I'll explain when we get in the truck." I was still dressed, so I got up and went with him. When we got outside, I asked what was going on. He told me there was something in the road by the tracks he needed to show me. I was not happy about that. I had just my own experience with something from that way. As we got there, it looked as if something had exploded all over the road. There was blood everywhere, as if something was mowed down in that spot. But there was no body parts anywhere. My brother related then what he had seen coming down the road. I was coming home, and as I got closer to the tracks, there was this huge thing lying in the road. I thought it must have been a mastiff or Great Dane in the road, but as I pulled up to it, it didn't look like a dog I'd ever seen. It was hairy. Its head and nose were twice the size of a dog. The body wasn't a dog, just dog-like, but much, much bigger. It was all over the place. There was an arm in the road, not a dog, a human arm. There was no trace of anything when we got there, and it was only minutes that it took us to get there. I said to get the hell out of there now, and we went back home. I told him what I experienced just before he got home. A couple of days later, my sister came to me and said she'd been seeing a large dog prowling around at night. It was huge, and she had seen it cross the street as she sat on the porch. I told her what my brother and I saw, and not to be outside alone until we could find out what it was. We got together and decided to stake out the yard over the next night. Sure enough, it was back in the neighbor's yard. This thing was about the size of a Shetland pony, black in color. We had flashlights and turned them on as it took off to the back wall behind the house. Their dog was going off like crazy. They had a small terrier. We watched this dog thing scale the wall. The neighbor came out to see what was going on, and we shouted there was something in his yard. He went back in and grabbed his pistol and went around back, but by then, it was gone.